Today on the Invested Mindset, we're going to talk about building businesses from the ground up. I'm your host, Tom Berry. My podcast is designed to help new and seasoned investors and entrepreneurs break free from the financial confusion by sharing real-world investing and business strategies they can use to build lasting wealth and financial freedom. So today we're going to talk about building businesses from the ground up. So a lot of times people will ask me, how in the world did you build so many companies? How are you running so many companies at one time? And the answer is you don't do it all at one time. You start with one, right? You start with one and you get it going well. And then you see other things and you start other things. But I think the first thing we need to do is go back to what makes a good company, what makes a good business. Let's start there. And I believe most successful companies start with solving a problem. And I think the bigger the problem that you can solve, in other words, it's either got to be a big problem or it's got to be a problem a lot of people have, right? The bigger the problem is that you solve or you can solve, the more success potential your business has. If you're just going out and doing the same thing that everybody else is doing and you're doing it the same way, well, why would I hire you, right? Why would I do business with you? There's got to be a problem that you are looking to solve. And I look at every business that I start that way. Every business I have started has been started because of a problem. And a lot of times it was a problem I had in my own company or in my own life, in my own investing career that I was trying to solve for. So let's start from the ground here and kind of build upon that with that premise. We're going to start by solving a problem. Now, and I'm going to just pick on a plumber. We'll use a plumber for an example here as we talk about how to build a business and why some people are so successful at it and quickly, and others are never really that successful at it. They just make ends meet. And I really have to believe that nobody goes into business for themselves. Nobody takes the risk of starting a company hoping to make ends meet, right? I mean, we could do that with a W-2. Most people could just make ends meet with a W-2 job and very little risk involved. But if you look at the success rate of businesses in this country, most businesses never make it past what I call mom and pop status. Now, what does mom and pop status mean? It means it's just the owner, maybe the owner and his owner's wife, and maybe they have one or two employees that they were forced to hire because they just couldn't do any more without those employees. And that's the bulk of businesses, small business in this country. And some of them have done what they've done for 30 years, 40 years, and they never get past that status. Now, I think it's very instructional to think about why and what is the mindset. In other words, what's that limitation? Because I believe most of the things that limit us in life are our mindset. Most of the things that limit us are the way we think about things. So what is it that most people do that keeps them from growing their business to something larger? And I can tell you one of the number one things out of all the entrepreneurs that I have coached, most of them do not want to hire employees. They want to run their company by themselves or as a couple, absolutely positively, as long as they possibly can before they hire their first employee, because most entrepreneurs are terrified of having employees. Now, they're not terrified of having the help. They're terrified of all of the bureaucracy, all of the labor, all of the accounting, all of the payroll that goes along with having employees. So if you are an aspiring entrepreneur, my advice to you is number one thing that I think you have to get your mind wrapped around is if I am going to build a successful company, I must get over the fear of hiring people. You must get over that fear, because at the end of the day, you don't have a business if you don't. At the end of the day, if it's just you and your spouse and maybe one or two other people, and something happens to you, that company will not continue. It will not continue to run. It will not. And that by definition means it's not a business. It's just a self-employment situation. You own a job. That's it. So we've got to get over the idea of, oh gosh, I don't want to hire people. Or, oh man, I don't know how I would hire people. Okay, it's scary. I get that. But figure it out. Get with somebody and figure it out. Everything is figure-outable if you want it bad enough. Now, somebody might ask me, how many employees do you want to have, Tom? And I will tell you all of them. I'd like to have all of them. Well, that's silly. No, it's not. Because employees add money to my bottom line. Every employee that I have adds money to my bottom line, my profitability. If they didn't, I wouldn't keep them, right? I might hire somebody and give them a shot for 6 months, but if they're not at the end of 6 months adding to my bottom line, am I going to keep them? Well, of course not. Of course not. That's the number 2 reason mom and pop entrepreneurs don't get bigger. They don't get bigger because they believe hiring people costs money. So my second lesson is employees don't cost money. They add money to your bottom line, every single one of them. If they don't, you wouldn't keep them. Okay? So we'll go back to the plumber and we'll use the plumber as an example. So a guy works for a plumbing company. He works for him for 10, 15 years. He gets paid a certain amount of dollars per hour while he's out on the job doing plumbing jobs. And he says to himself, wait a minute, the company is charging 3 times that per hour. They're only giving me a third of it or half or whatever the number is. He says, I'm going to go get a van of my own and I've already got a lot of my own tools. I'm going to start my own. A lot of people call me now and ask me to come and do their plumbing jobs. I'm doing a lot of side jobs anyway. If I started my own plumbing company, I'd get to charge the same thing my employer is charging, only I'd get to keep all of it. That's reasonable. That's a reasonable thought. It's only half a thought, but it's reasonable and it's accurate and true. But here's the part that the plumber or the electrician or any other trade is not thinking about. They're not thinking about all of the jobs in that plumbing company that they currently work for that they are not having to do now, right? They don't have to handle payroll. They don't have to handle IT. They don't have to handle accounting. They don't have to handle website development and maintenance. All of these other jobs that go into that successful plumbing company that he works for, he didn't have to do those things. He didn't have to do those tasks. But the day he stops working for them and he hangs his little shingle and says, I'm now in business for myself. He gets those magnetic signs and he slaps them on the side of his own van or truck and he says, now I'm in business for myself. No, you're self-employed. You're not in business yet. You don't own a business yet. Now, maybe the same guy goes out and he continues to grow his business, and he is busy. He's really busy. But the problem is all those other jobs that were being done in that previous large plumbing company he worked for, none of those jobs are being done now. Accounting, bookkeeping is a mess. At the end of the year, he goes to his tax preparer and he hands them a shoebox full of receipts, which means if you ask any accountant or tax prep person, he is not taking full advantage of the deductions available to them by law. He's not developing any marketing. He's not doing anything to grow the business, not maintaining a website, so he doesn't have credibility in the marketplace, not using social media, probably doesn't have an attorney that is working with him on entity structure or advertising or contracts or leases or trademarks or copyrights or civil suits or anything like that. So at first, when an entrepreneur goes out on their own, they have to either do all of these things themselves, which the plumber is most generally not qualified to do most of the things I just named, or the second option is to surround themselves with a team of people that do those things. And that is the key to growing from a mom and pop to a small company. From a mom and pop, you're a 2-person shop at most, maybe 4. You got a couple people helping you. But to have a small business, you might have 10, 15, 20 employees. And to get there, you've got to build a team. Now, that team can come from a lot of different sources. They don't all have to be employees. You can hire a CPA on contract just to do your taxes, right? You don't have to hire a CPA as an employee when you're a small shop. Attorney, you're not going to hire an attorney to have on staff, but you got to have one that you can call. You got to have one that can look things over so that you don't make mistakes. You got to have one that can look at some of the things you're doing to make sure that you're staying in compliance and everything is legal, going through your contracts as you're signing contracts and so forth. So we have to have a team, and some of those people we're going to bring on as professional consultants. Now, others we're going to have to hire. So at some point, you're going to see, I am so busy, things are falling off the table, or falling through the cracks, right? That's your cue that you've got to hire. Now, my wife, the first time I told her we were going to make a big hire, we were going to hire a property manager. We had 74 units we were managing ourselves. We were a mom and pop shop, just Tom and Melissa. And I said, we've got to hire help. I'm going to hire this lady. I'm going to have her help us manage these properties. And my wife, being the person that handled the books in the home, she says, where are we going to get the money? And I said, what do you mean? And she says, well, you're going to have to hire this lady and pay her X number of dollars a month. And I'm looking in the bank account and we don't have that many extra dollars at the end of each month. So where are you going to get the money? And this is the problem with a lot of mom and pop investors and mom and pop entrepreneurs. They look at the bank account and they think that this is a zero-sum situation. And I'm going to hire this person and they're going to take away from our company this much money. That is incorrect. If you were doing it correctly, that is incorrect. Okay? Let's talk about this. If I'm hiring this property manager, that means I don't have to manage these properties anymore. These 74 units, I've got somebody else managing. I've got somebody else handling the tenants and handling the issues with maintenance and so forth. what does that do for me? Other than it costs me X number of dollars a month. It frees up my time. It frees up my time to do what? Well, it frees up my time to now go find more property, to go find more deals, go find more apartment complexes, more houses, whatever it is that I'm buying. So it frees me up by me hiring somebody at a lower level task that I'm currently doing myself. It frees me up to go do higher level tasks. And by me going and doing these higher level tasks, doesn't it just make sense that we're going to make way more per month from those higher level tasks that I'm now able to do than what she's costing us in taking some of those lower level tasks off my plate for me? Hiring people is not a zero-sum game. And my wife, the way she looked at it was totally incorrect. Now, she obviously knows that now after years and years and many companies and many hires. I don't even remember what that hire cost, but it couldn't have been more than maybe $3,000 a month. We've made hires now that are six-figure hires because we needed tasks done that we could hire done for less than our time was currently worth. Now, think about what I just said there. To grow a business, you want to hire tasks done that you can hire done for a price that is less than what your time is currently worth. So in that first scenario, I hired this lady. She handled all those units for me. Now, I still had to oversee her, but I was spending 20% of the time that I used to spend managing the properties, managing her. That freed up 80% of my time. And that 80% I poured into those higher level tasks that would bring in more revenue and thus more profit for the company. So hiring is not a zero-sum game if you hire correctly. Now, I'm going to really pound on hiring because I think this is the absolute biggest reason people can't grow from a mom and pop to a small shop and from a small shop to a mid-sized company. And we moved from a I would call it a mom and pop. My former business partner and I started our lending company in 11 years ago, 2015, 14, somewhere in there, into 14, early 15. And it was just he and I. We worked out of our homes. He worked out of his house. I worked out of my house. We had no employees. We did 100% of the work that was necessary for that company. And I'll remember when we hired our first employee, I told him, I said, Donald, you need to hire an employee. You need to hire somebody to help you. And it was a huge, monumental task to get him over that mental block of hiring somebody. He's like, yeah, but if I hire somebody, we'd have to have an office. Yeah, we do. Let's go get an office. Yeah, let's go get you an office. Yep. Well, then we'd have to have furniture. We don't have anything for an office. Yeah, I know. We'll have to do that. Well, then we got to pay them. Yep, sure do. So this first hire for that company was going to be a really big expense for us. But I knew it would set us up for the next few hires. We could put 5 people in that office over time. And we did very quickly. By the end of that first year, after that first hire, we were completely full in that office and we had to go rent more space next door to put another 5. Because it opened the floodgate for us once we had people that were ready to do the tasks needed to be done. We could bring in so much more volume. We could bring in so many more loans, and we could process so many more than what the two of us could do just by ourselves. Now, hiring people depends on 2 things. This only works if you do two things right. You've got to hire the right person, and you got to put them in the right job. And that's the part a lot of people will try. They'll say, I know I need people. I don't like the idea of hiring, but I've got to have people. So I hired so-and-so, and it didn't work out. It just sucked. So I'm just going to do it myself. I hear that all the time. Well, I'm sure the first time you rode a bicycle, you didn't just whiz down the street without any crashes. You probably crashed a few times, but you got back up and you got back on the bike and you tried it again and again. Well, kind of the same thing here. Okay, maybe you hired the wrong person, or maybe you hired the right person, but you put them in the wrong place. You put them in the wrong seat. Those are the two biggest mistakes we as business owners make. So the first thing I will say is learn how to hire before you just go out and hire. And there are great books on this that you can read that teach you how to properly hire people. A really good one that I like is Traction. Look up the book Traction, and it talks about putting the right people in the right seat. And that concept is a very, very valid concept. If you don't have you could have the right person. You could have a great person with a great work ethic, smart, intelligent, credentialed, even experienced if you want, and put them in the wrong position and they're going to fail miserably. It's not their fault. It's the person that hired them's fault because they put them in a place that they couldn't possibly excel. And that's a big mistake that a lot of entrepreneurs make. The second mistake we make is just hiring the wrong person in the first place and not getting the person with a good work ethic, the person with morals and character and a congruent value system. It's interesting. I was sitting with one of my managers just before I came to do this podcast. And I said something and she said, "Oh, I know, I'm exactly the same way." She's like, "That's why we get along so well." She's like, "Well, in fact, so is so-and-so and so and so-and-so." And we laughed and we're like, yeah, our entire management team thinks the same way in this particular subject. And the subject was we're loyal to a fault, but once you break our loyalty, you're dead to us. And that could be said of me. That could be said of most of my management team, probably all of my management team. We're all that way. We're very forgiving. We're very kind. We're very loving. We're very loyal. But man, you stab me in the back and you're done. You're just done forever. There is never a way you're going to get back in. And she's like, "Yeah, totally. I'm exactly that way." Well, what I'm trying to get at is you need to build a culture in your business when you start hiring where you're hiring people of the same mindset. I mean, not exactly the same, obviously, but in the core values, in the core character, in those areas, you want to have people that are similar to you, particularly in your management team, particularly in the people that you think could grow with your company and eventually take on some of your higher level tasks, right? Now, I have people on my team that are not like me. They don't think like me, but they're not on a management track either. They're doing lower level tasks and may always do lower level tasks and may always be happy doing that. And that's fine too. But if you find somebody and you think, man, this person could really grow with me, that's a person that you want to have the same morals, the same values, the same character. And then lastly, on hiring, you want to hire the right personality type for the job that you want done. Now, let me give you an example of that. I had a property manager, one of my last property managers, when we closed down our management company that was managing our apartment complexes and single family homes. Wonderful lady, wonderful worker, just an absolute workhorse, just like me. Didn't care what the job was. She would do it. just because it needed done. And I love to surround myself with people like that. But I didn't have a job for her after that. And we sat down and talked about it. And she's like, no, there's nothing that you're currently doing that I feel I'd like to do. And I'm like, okay, well, I guess this is it. She's like, yeah, no hard feelings. We worked well and we enjoyed it together. But it had come to an end. Now, fast forward a year or so, a good buddy of mine who also knew her calls me up and he says, hey, what do you think about me hiring so-and-so? And I said, well, what are you going to have her do? Now, see, I could have said, oh, absolutely, she's awesome, which is true, 100% true. But I didn't. I immediately asked, what are you going to have her doing? And he's like, well, I'd have her doing, managing my properties. I'd have her showing my properties and leasing, my vacant rentals. And then I'd have her doing, my books and my bookkeeping. And I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. Hold on. He said, what? I said, the person that is going to be great at leasing your vacants is not the person you want doing your books. Now, this person that we're talking about, she will be phenomenal at filling your vacants. I mean, she could sell ice to a daggum Eskimo. She is awesome at filling units, but you sure as hell don't want her in your books because she's not detail oriented. It's not going to be done properly. It's not going to be done accurately. Her attention to detail is not what is needed for a bookkeeper. I want a bookkeeper that couldn't sell anything, but is phenomenally detail oriented and doesn't mind sitting in a cubicle or a desk or an office for 8 hours a day, just staring at a computer screen and reports. That's what you need for your books. That is not her. That is not this person we are talking about. Okay. She has got ants in her pants. She has got ADD just like I do. She is a salesperson. She's got to be up and moving. She's not going to be your books person. So this is an example of how we as entrepreneurs, we as business owners, oftentimes set people up for failure. So after I had that talk with him, I said, hire her, but only have her doing the parts she is good at. Because if you give her all of that work that you were going to give her, she's going to be great at half of it. She's going to fail miserably at the other half, and you're not going to be happy with her, even though she's phenomenal at leasing your apartments and leasing your houses. So think about I always start with this. What are the tasks that I want my new hire to do? What do I want them to do? I don't start with a position. I start with a task list. And I say, what do I want this person to do for me? And I write it out. I want them to do this. I want them to do this. I want them to do this. These are going to be their daily tasks. And then I look at that task list and say, what personality type is best suited for doing those tasks? Right? Is it going to be an A-type action person like me? Or is it going to be the stability type like my wife, who she's more comfortable in an office? She doesn't want to sell. She doesn't want to deal with the public. She doesn't want to be on a podcast. She doesn't want to be on a stage speaking. That's my style. That's not her style. But that's beautiful because as a mom and pop team, we made a pretty doggone good team. Right? She handled the books. She handled the accounting. She handled all of that. I handled the front end stuff, the sales stuff. But over time, we also needed a couple of other personality types. We also needed that relational person. That's the person that we needed that has that creativity, that could do the marketing and put together a marketing program and really dig into that and get our company and our brand out there. I suck at that kind of stuff, and my wife's worse at it than I am, as she would agree with me on. So we went out and we found somebody of that creative type. And we brought that person in and we said, this is what we need. She was at the time in college studying for a career in marketing. So she was not real expensive yet because she was still in college, didn't have her degree, and we didn't need anybody that was real experienced with a degree at that point. But it was a way for us to fill a void in our company that we had. And then I remember another very key hire was when we hired our first IT person. And by the way, that person is still with us to this day and is at a very high level in our company. But we needed somebody that had that IT background, that IT mindset. And again, he wasn't trained for it at all. He didn't have a degree in it. He has a degree, but not in that. But he had a passion for it. And I saw that and I said, we need that in our company. And again, my wife is going, we can't afford that. You know how much that's going to cost? I said, yeah, I do. We can't afford that. I said, well, it doesn't come from us. He's either going to pay him for himself or we won't keep him long term. We won't be able to. And that's the way you want to hire. You want to hire for your weaknesses, not specifically your weaknesses, but you want to hire for your company's weaknesses. And when you have your company rounded out with all four of those, and it might not be 4 hires that get you there, you might have to have 10 hires because you might need 3 action-oriented people in sales, and you might need a couple in bookkeeping and accounting. Before you get to that IT person, I don't know what, we were probably at 10 or 20 before we got to that person. But when we did get that rounded out, all 4 personalities in our company was set to explode because we had it all covered. And then we just added as we needed. Now, when do you hire? I said before, you're going to notice things are falling through the cracks, right? Not getting done. You really want to hire before that happens. When you notice things are slipping, things are falling, that's when you sit down and make that task list and say, I need to get another hire. Because the worst time to hire is when you are so busy because you didn't hire that you don't have time to hire. And much less do you have time to train. So therefore, again, big mistake we make. We wait until we're so busy, we are forced into it, and then we're too busy to do it. And if we do, we hire them, we hire quickly, but just because we need somebody fast, which means we probably shove the wrong person in there just because we're desperate. And then we give them no training. Well, how could we train them? We're too busy. We're too busy to train them. So we want to hire before we get to that point. And that is honestly the secret to my success in growing businesses. It is not, building this big, massive business plan over 10 years and I'm going to follow this or that. It's being good at hiring, and it's being good at knowing when to hire, and it's being good at knowing who to hire and what to have that person do in my company. Always be hiring for lower level tasks so you can keep pushing yourself to higher and higher level tasks. And as long as you're doing that, you can continue to scale and grow that business to whatever size you want it to be. I hope this was helpful for you. We'll see you on the next podcast, and we'll see you at the top. Thanks for joining us on The Invested Mindset. To continue receiving these actionable wealth building strategies, subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Turn on the auto download to ensure you never miss an episode. And if today's insights moved you closer to financial freedom, please take a moment to leave us a rating. It helps fellow entrepreneurs and investors discover these valuable strategies. I'm Tom Berry, and I'll see you next time as we continue building the path to lasting wealth and freedom.